USS Texas BB-35 is a New York class battleship that was ordered the 24th of June, 1910, laid down the 17th of April, 1911, launched on the 18th of May, 1912, and commissioned on the 12th of March, 1914. Texas has a long service history spanning from the Tampico Incident in April of 1914, World War I, and World War II until she was eventually decommissioned in 1948. After returning from action in the Pacific Theater following the closing of World War II, USS Texas would find herself officially placed in reserve in Baltimore, Maryland, June 1946, after going through inactivation. In April 1947, USS Texas, the Battleship Texas Commission, was founded by the state legislature of Texas to oversee and care for the ship. In 1948, $225,000 was paid to tow her from Baltimore to her new home being San Jacinto, and on March 17th, she departed and arrived in San Jacinto State Park on April 20th. At this point, responsibility of the ship was given over to the state of Texas, and then later, in 1983, there were concerns with the leadership of the Battleship Texas Commission, which prompted the Texas state legislature to abolish the commission and give control and responsibility of the ship over to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. In total, since 1948, USS Texas has served 74 years as a permanent memorial, or specifically a ship museum. Today, she is the only remaining World War I era dreadnought battleship in existence, making her remarkably special for a 110-year-old warship since her launch in 1912. On August 1st, 2020, the Battleship Texas Foundation, being a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization, took the lead in the operations of Battleship Texas, with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department retaining an advisory and oversight role as shared on the Battleship Texas Foundation's website. The Foundation has 4 goals in working on the following preservation efforts and education outreach programs. The first being with their partners in Valcour, bringing the ship to dry dock to completely repair the ship's hull below the waterline, fully restoring the ship's anti-aircraft guns and secondary battery, increasing public awareness of Battleship Texas, her history, the men who served on her, as well as her current and future preservation needs. And fourthly, partnerships with local museums and organizations to continue displaying Battleship Texas artifacts and educational materials while the ship is away. Now she has begun that first major step of the Foundation's efforts in receiving some much-needed repairs due to her age and the hull of her ship plagued with deterioration, leading to holes and leaks in the hull of the ship. As AP News shares that the, quote, greatest challenge in recent years for the USS Texas has been a leaky, rusty hull that at times forced workers to pump out about 2,000 gallons or 7,570 liters of water per minute from the 110-year-old ship. On August 31st, USS Texas was towed from her home in San Jacinto State Park to Galveston, Texas to Gulf Copper Dry Dock and Rig Repair Company on Pelican Island. In total, the journey was an 8-hour trip. Here she will undergo a $35 million hull restoration project, and it's estimated that Texas will at least need a year for repairs. And once these repairs are completed, she will then sail to an unknown location that will be her future home. The Battleship Texas Foundation wants to ensure that she will be in a favorable location that will help attract the most visitors to financially sustain the ship and future endeavors. The location list now that the Foundation is currently reviewing is Galveston, Beaumont, or Baytown, Texas. Over the last several decades, in particular the last decade, USS Texas has gone through many challenges, dating back to 1983 when she had deteriorated quite extensively since her 35 years at San Jacinto Battlegrounds. Above the waterline, the ship seemed run down, but not too bad. However, it was below the waterline where alarming deterioration had occurred and which raised concerns over the ship's survivability. Lower interior areas were full of water and structural support in several parts of the ship had failed. The administrators of the Battleship Texas Commission lacked the finances to maintain the ship, and so that is when the responsibility for the ship was transferred to Texas Parks and Wildlife Department on the 1st of September 1983. And in order to properly repair the ship for the time being, Texas needed to be removed from the water with repairs done in a dry dock. This would occur from 1988 to 1989. However, before she could be moved to the dry dock, she had to undergo structural repairs, and thousands of artifacts were inventoried and removed from the ship before her arrival to said dry dock. Ironically, the dry dock she would be towed to would also be in Galveston, Texas, to Todd's shipyard on Pelican Island. Her journey to Todd's shipyard was rather eventful in comparison to her voyage several days ago on August 31st, 2022 to Gulf Copper Dry Dock and Rig Repair Company, also on Pelican Island. The plan was to have multiple tugboats tow Texas to the shipyard beginning on a cold Tuesday morning, the 13th of December, 1988. The following information comes from Chuck Moore of the BB-35 volunteer group, who shares his experience of this day. Quote, "At 6 a.m., tugboats began tying up to the stern and pulled, but the ship did not budge. Texas was being held in her berth by 40 years of silt that had washed into the berth and piled up around the hull. Additional tugboats were brought in till there were 6 tugs with 25,000 horsepower pulling on the lines and their propeller wash blowing away the silt from the hull. During the pulling, one tug blew an engine and one tow line broke, with the sound a high-powered hunting rifle. I was there and saw and heard the line break. And by 1:13 p.m., the horsepower pulling on the tow lines and propeller wash finally pulled Texas from her berth and into the ship channel. By the time Texas was turned in the ship channel for the tow south, flooding alarms had already gone off. Because the rudder was frozen 14.5 degrees to starboard, one extra tugboat was needed on the port side at the stern to counteract the rudder. The 40-mile tow to Todd's shipyard was to take 10 to 12 hours at a maximum speed of 4 miles per hour. The tow speed, though, was increased, and Texas arrived at Todd's at 9:05 p.m. And by the time Texas was being pushed into the Todd's dry dock on Pelican Island, the clearance between the keel and the dry dock blocks was 6 inches. End quote, Chuck Moore. Now, having arrived in the dockyard, the following repairs were to be done to Texas: replacing the plate on the rudder, restoring deck drainage system and scuppers throughout the ship, the painting of all the guns of the ship, repainting the entire ship, repairing tanks throughout the interior, fabricating an SK radar antenna, repairing multiple steel plates across the ship, in particular along the tires of the ship, and restoring multiple windows, repairing the smokestack, to restore crane exteriors port and starboard side, removing concrete decking throughout the main deck, and rehabilitating steel decking underneath, to renew the anchor and anchor chain, and epoxy coating on the underwater hull. Texas would be in the dry dock from the 13th of December 1988 until the 6th of August 1989. Following completion of the work, she was once again afloat in water, where she was moved to Greens Bayou, which was 8 miles away from San Jacinto, while berth improvements were being completed. While at Greens Bayou, additional work was done, including a wooden deck, attachment of monopile moorings, installation of 40mm mounts, Mark 51 gun directors, and the sick bay area of the ship was restored. On the 28th of July, 1990, Texas would return to San Jacinto and making her 8-mile trip, towed by tugboats of course, however this time with a large group of veterans who had served aboard Texas to celebrate her return to the battleground. The newly improved berth at San Jacinto had been widened and deepened, with the mooring system installed being 4 monopiles on the starboard side of the ship that were thrust 70 feet into the bed of the berth. Texas was safe and secure once again. However, after another several decades had passed by, she was once again in danger as aging and deterioration had once again taken a toll on the hull of Texas. Two significant occasions would occur, with the first being a rather stressful situation in 2012 where the museum had to be closed for 3 months as more than 90 leaks were patched by crews, in total costing over $2 million. The second occasion would occur on the 11th of June 2017 when officials of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department closed the battleship when it was noticed the ship was off kilter or not balanced and beginning to list. A leak in the hull of Texas had over time increased to ripping a hole in the hull, causing Texas to tilt 8 degrees to one side. The next day, emergency crews had patched a 6-inch by 8-inch hole in the hull, and 2 days later, a total of 13 leaks had been patched on the hull, with the likelihood of more leaks existing. It was clear that if USS Texas was to survive, she would need a major overhaul with repairs to her hull to secure the future of the ship. Which brings us to the current efforts by state officials in the Foundation and leading in securing of funds so that Texas will remain a ship museum for decades to come. The mission of the Battleship Texas Foundation is to preserve and enhance the Battleship Texas and develop this historic ship into a premier museum and visitor attraction. Thousands of visitors will come every year, with new generations having the opportunity to experience history themselves and learning the importance of freedom and the story of a ship and her crew who fought in both world wars to secure peace and freedom for millions.